My name's Alice Roberts. I'm from CPRE London. We're the London branch of the national charity CPRE. We're doing monthly webinars now on a series of subjects. I'll come on to the subject in a moment. If everybody could mute themselves and switch off their videos, that just helps a bit with bandwidth. That would be great. So yeah, thanks very much for coming today, and we'll crack on. So today's webinar is tackling inequality and access to green space in London, and this is a subject which is really close to our hearts, and I'm just kind of scratching my head a bit about why we haven't done one already on this subject, or not for quite a while anyway. I think it's because it's taken me a really long time to get to a point where I feel that we've been able to do the work that we wanted to do, which was to create a map or a new map of the way that we look at access to green space in London. So today I wanted to talk to you about that work, what we've done and how we did it, but more importantly, how we go about tackling access to green space in London and how we look at inequality. So yeah, so it's very much, you know, I'm conscious that the mapping is great, but actually what we need to do is tackle the inequality where it exists. So if we can move on, sorry, I had problems with my own slides, so I've got to have somebody to move my slides for me. So can you move on to the next one? So I just wanted to mention, of course, that this subject has been around forever. And the Urban Design Group, who we very kindly let us use their Zoom account for our webinars, sent me, so Robert from UDG sent me this when he saw that we were doing this webinar, Octavia Hill, back in 1888. The need of open spaces for the inhabitants of our large towns has been so often brought before the public that it is difficult now, in urging that they should be provided, to use any arguments that are new, so that advocates must base their claims to detention on the fact that the reasons they use are self-evident. So I suppose that's just to say that you know, I'm not going to be going into why it's important to have green spaces today. We are assuming that they are important. So if you keep going to the next slide, this was just to show that, of course, this is perennial issue, and this is a very recent article, September this month, 2025, an article in City AM. Even with world-class parks, Londoners don't have enough green space. So keeping going. So as I said, tackling inequality in access is partly about measuring access. So how do we do that? But also it's about how we tackle it. And I think, you know, what I really want people to think about today is about, you know, if you feel that there is no way of tackling access to green space or to providing more parks in London, I really want you to go away with the feeling that actually that's a nonsense. There is absolutely many ways that we can tackle access to green space and inequality in access. Going on. So the current system that exists is in the London Plan. So that's the planning framework for London, the document that governs land use planning. Boroughs are required to assess open space. And the way they're required to do this is quite complex, but it essentially relates to the type of park and the distance you are from it. So there's a principle that if it's a small open space, that you should have access to something not, you know, say 400 meters away. If it's a very large regional park, then the principle would be that you would only need to be 3.2 kilometers. I think that's what that's meant to say, away for you to have a reasonable level of access, and so on. So the one thing I wanted you to take away from that is basically that it's about, it's partially about the size of the space, but actually the principal measure is about the distance to that space. So moving on. So we wanted to think about whether that was really an effective way to measure deficiency. So deficiency is the term used to describe access to space, to green space. Are there areas in London which is deficient in green space? So these are termed areas of deficiency, or AODs in the lingo. So I think that, what we're saying is that this system no doubt has its merits. So the current system no doubt has its merits. And indeed, it was much improved by Giggle, who to try to avoid the problem created by the kind of as the crow flies measure, when in fact people might have to walk quite a long way round or travel round a park in order to gain access. So it has been improved a great deal, but still doesn't reflect to a great extent the size of the green space, and more importantly, the population served by a green space. So another thing that was happening was that we were seeing areas like Wembley Park and Lewisham town centres being developed at super high density, but without parks. And we wanted to, challenge that and get the powers that be to think more about that. And of course, there was the London Plan Review coming, so we felt the Mayor should consider new ways of mapping and indeed tackling deficiency, as well as promoting better green space provision in major new housing developments. And I think more generally, we were becoming concerned that really only lip service was being paid to this important issue, so that while planners were required to map access, that there's not really a strong requirement to do anything about it. Moving on. So this is a picture of Wembley Park. So you can see, hopefully, if you do, you can just have a look on your own Google satellite view. Lots and lots of blocks of flats, very, very little, well, no green space really planned in. Some kind of what they call linear parks, so spaces that run along between. Really, so my kind of, can you go out with your kids and kick a football around benchmark is missing entirely, I think, from this. So moving down, I just wanted to show you the view from a bit further, panned out a bit further, so that you can see that Wembley Park red dot in the stadium, actually there aren't many parks around there, and the one to the west, which is King Edward VII Park, is actually more than 400, or it's 400 meters-ish from the west end of Wembley, of this whole area, the new development area. So not really much access, and also it's bounded by two big railway lines, so there's a lot of difficulty for many people in getting to spaces outside of that area. Moving on. So this is Lewisham town centre, and again, lots of very tall tower blocks and very little green space planned into it. And again, the next slide shows the kind of panned out view. Next slide, there we are. So the panned out view shows you that there are in fact some very nice, very big green spaces, of course, Blackheath, and then there's Hillyfields Park, two really very, very lovely, high quality green spaces. So that brings into question, well, is that okay? And maybe it is. And we're not saying that we have the one answer to this problem, but I think we are saying that, when you plan very big, very dense developments like this, are you actually thinking about whether that single measure, like of being perhaps 400 meters from a district park or a proper park is actually okay? So moving on down. Of course, creating a good map of areas of deficiency of public green open space relies on data, on what is available to the public. And I did want to stop and talk about this for a moment, because it's not just what's available, but it's what amenity it provides. So is it a park, or is it a playing field, or is it just an open space? That kind of things. And also, you don't know, and I see somebody's just posted about the quality. Some places are very boring, I think you just posted. So it doesn't tell you much about that space. It might tell you, that there's a green open space and that the public can access it, but it doesn't really tell you about the quality or the type of space or what amenity it provides. So it relies on the local borough having good information. So I just wanted to talk about the challenges with the data briefly, moving on. So this is an example of a site in Hammersmith and Fulham, Hurlingham Park. Now, this is listed, so the borough lists this as being, or at least in the official records, it is listed as a park, whereas we know that in fact only a small part of the park is an open park. Most of it, as somebody has just posted, is a very expensive private members club, and yet it is in official records down as a park. So that's kind of one problem, and obviously that can be amended, so that's not a disaster, but it does, as you said. I'm just trying to give an example of how if if you don't have good data to begin with, it's very hard to identify areas of deficiency. So keeping going, I've just got a couple of other examples. So this is an interesting case. If you can move it up slightly, I think I can't see it all, maybe. Oh no, sorry, you're right. So this is listed as Weigel Road playing fields, but the point with this is that the whole of the upper section is actually fenced off, so the public can't get into it. The bottom section is a playing field, and the section to the left, which doesn't have a red line around it, so the red line means that it's officially listed in the kind of the sites that are available to the public. To the left of that, to the west of that, is the Bowring Sports Ground, which actually is in use, but by a football club. So the issue with playing fields that I wanted to bring in here is, well, partly are they in use, are they not in use, but partly also some boroughs, sometimes they are in the data set and sometimes they're not. And there are lots of different reasons for that. So if you keep going down, so this is an example of where you see, so the green areas which are a brighter green are the one message to say. Okay, so we're back in the recording and we're back online. John, you might want to send another message out to the registered attendees to say we're back online. And I'll keep going just so that we make sure we don't run out of time. So I was just saying that there are ways in which data is recorded, which means that it's not always easy to know how much publicly accessible open green space there is out there. So this is an example of a site where there's lots of playing pitches, some of which I know are only book and play. Most of them are book and play. Some of them are listed as in the public open space dataset, and some are not. So moving on. This is a site where some parks are shown but others are not. So there's something called fish ponds playing fields to the bottom, and then another park which is called Springfield Park to the top. And they're new parks actually. One's entirely new park, and one is a site which has been opened up to the public quite recently. So that's in part about just about how sites data is updated. So keeping going. So just really trying to say that it's not straightforward. Sports facilities are a particular conundrum, something for a future webinar, I think. There's no one easy answer to identifying the way that we identify areas of deficiency. Nonetheless, we felt an attempt should be made to look at new methods of calculating areas of deficiency, and we chose to map green space per person as a new, more effective way of grading areas. And that would also allow us a kind of gradation of green space per person, rather than just simply saying it's a yes or no according to some parameters. So we used GIGGLE. So GIGGLE is Green Space Information for Greater London. They are the Environment Record Centre for London, and they have an open data set called Spaces to Visit, which represents the best available data for publicly accessible green space. as in our view. Keeping going. And so now I'm going to hand over to our statistician, Gessienne Gray, who we found through Statisticians for Society. So I just wanted to give a shout out to them. They're incredibly useful if you're a charity and have a big statistics job that you need doing, which you don't know how to do yourself. And it was indeed finding them that meant that we could finally do this piece of work I've been trying to do for a long time. I just want to also quickly say thanks to our volunteer, James Melly, who's also a professional with statistics and who's helped us to get to where we are. So yes, so if you can stop sharing my slides, and Gessienne, if you could introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks so much. Thank you everyone for coming to this meeting. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Gessienne Gray. As Alice said, I'm a volunteer with Statisticians for Society, which is a scheme run by the Royal Statistical Society, which provides free statistical advice and volunteers for charities. And I was tasked with creating a new index and map of access to green space in London to address some of the inadequacies you've heard about from the previous methods that were available. So mappings do exist, as we've looked at some of the areas of deficiency mappings. There's this London 10-minute walk map, which was designed to support the mayor's pledge in his manifesto to improve London's network of green corridors and open spaces so that more Londoners would live within a 10-minute walk of green space. So this map was created by the Mayor of London and Giggle, who also created the area of deficiency map we've been discussing, and it aims to target areas that fail that commitment. That's a fairly kind of conservative commitment in terms of being any size of park qualifies, and the 10-minute walk distance they've used is 800 meters. So it's kind of more permissive than the 400-meter distance that you've seen in the London plan. But it's a kind of basic commitment, and it includes any accessible green space of at least 0.02 hectares, which can be quite small, obviously. And as Alice has discussed, it doesn't account for population size or the exact size of parks, i.e. how much pressure there is on these available green spaces. As Alice discussed a little bit, Giggle has also produced a set of mappings based on public open space categories as defined in the London plan, with areas of deficiency that are based on distances that vary based on the size category of park that they belong to. But we thought that these mappings were still inadequate in the sense that they fail to account for population and thus pressure on park space, which is becoming increasingly important as these kind of high density areas emerge and population density increases across London. So we felt that it was time to rethink this purely category and distance-based approach to measuring access to green space. In order to address those inadequacies, we worked on designing our own mapping as an example of what a more comprehensive population-weighted index of access to green space could look like. So we experimented with a lot of different options, and eventually we chose an index that is constructed in 2 steps. What you're looking at here is the first step, where we've calculated a pressure indicator for each green space from the sites to visit data set that Alex mentioned. For each of those public open spaces, we selected all the output areas. That's like a geographical area just above postcode. So we selected all the output areas within 400 meters of each public open space, calculated the total population of those areas based on population figures from the 2021 census, and then divided the total area of the open space in square meters by the total population of the output areas within 400 meters of the boundary. So that creates a pressure indicator for that public open space in square meters per person. And as you can see here, within the same sort of general area of London, larger parks have much less pressure on them than smaller parks, obviously. But if you explore our map, you'll find that between areas of London as well, the number of people living around that area also influences the pressure index, so that a large park in one area might have a higher pressure index than a similarly sized park somewhere where there's fewer people around. Once we'd calculated that, we used it to create an average pressure indicator for each output area. So for each output area, again, we'd select all the public open spaces then within 400 meters of its boundary, kind of reversing the method we used in the first step, and then take the mean of the pressure indicators of those parks within 400 meters of the output area, and that creates the public open space per person index for that particular zone. For all the output areas that didn't have any public open spaces within 400 meters, we set the index to 0. And the result is this index, which accounts for the size of parks as well as the number of people who might be using them. And creates a value that is kind of sliding scale, which accounts for exact size and which exists for every area of London. Overall, we found a median value of about 3 square meters of accessible public open space per person. One notable difference between our map and the existing options is that many areas in inner and central London, which have high population density, are not highlighted as much in other maps because they have a lot of small parks dotted around, but they appear as having very low average access here when we're accounting for population pressure on those parks. So we think that demonstrates the usefulness of our approach. It's highlighting an issue that wasn't brought to light in previous versions. And we also think it's useful to employ a method which allows for different degrees of deficiency to be highlighted, like in this map, rather than purely a binary option in which an area is either deficient or not. The current version of this map is imperfect. We definitely recognize that. The data set we used for public open space, as Alice mentioned, sites to visit, has known inaccuracies and is incomplete. We also didn't have access to the specialized methods and software that, for example, Giggle has used to calculate walking distances to entrances of sites. So this map is based on as the crow flies distance, which is not the best practice that could be used in this mapping project. And we only accounted for the minimum 400 meter accessibility benchmark for small open spaces and pocket parks in the London plan, rather than dynamically adjusting the distance-based benchmark based on the size of parks as is recommended in the London plan. So we recognize that this can't be the final version, the final product that's used for these purposes, but we think that it's an important proof of concept, which demonstrates the need for some population-adjusted measure of access to public open space. There are areas highlighted in this map that are being left behind if we are using other versions to prioritize park access. And we, generally speaking, believe that more thought needs to be put into the question of how to measure access and prioritize genuinely low access areas in terms of access to open space. There are many ways to approach it, but it's clear to us that the existing solutions are inadequate. We're open to ideas and suggestions from all of you in terms of issues which may be being glossed over by this version or other versions of open space access mapping. And we'd be really interested to hear what other aspects you think might be missing and should be taken into account. Thanks. I'll pass back to Alice now.
Amazing, thank you so much. And I know it's quite complex and you may have questions, and maybe if you could put questions in the chat, maybe, I think you said Gessienne, I've been calling you Gessienne. Gessienne, you could have a look and see if you can maybe answer some of those questions. It was quite complicated for us. If John Youngin, you could get my slides back up to where I was, that'd be amazing while I'm chatting away. I just wanted to make one point, which is that it is the policy in the London plan that we're interested in challenging or talking about. Certainly not the mapping that Giggle has done, which has been, you know, their attempt to, or a very good attempt to show visually what that looks like. what we're talking about is the policy behind those maps, and that's up to the mayor to change. So the presentation has a link here to the page on our website where you can access the map and have a good look at it. There are more details on how we did the calculation there. We're also hopefully posting it in the chat as we speak, or as I speak. And if you can move on now. So I just wanted to make a couple of points about what we've done and the next steps. So just really wanted to say that, this is about trying to create something that's useful. It's certainly not the be all and the end all. We're not claiming that this is perfect. I think there was a question about 3 meters squared per person. I'm not sure that that's specifically the issue that we're kind of trying to focus on. What we're trying to do is to find a way of saying, look, there are definitely some areas where there's much more pressure on green space than others. How do we identify them? And also, thinking about, do they coincide with areas of high deprivation, that kind of thing. So we submitted this to the London Plan Review earlier this year as evidence. We really hope London boroughs will find it useful for the time being anyway, and we've certainly done a bit of publicity to boroughs. We don't claim it's the best or perfect method, but we do hope it stimulates wider conversations. We hope it brings renewed focus to an important subject, as well as perhaps some focus on the complex subject of how boroughs both classify and gather data on public amenity green space. And we want to identify areas, as I said, with high levels of deprivation and low green space per person, and maybe create a map that coincides with the heat map that we've created, and also areas of deprivation. So perhaps producing that map so that can be viewed by boroughs and everybody as well. So moving on, I think my next slide is now about what we do about it. So I'm going to try and move quickly because otherwise we won't have any time for talking and questions. So tackling the inequality, if we keep going, the first thing I want to do is talk about street parks, and whatever we want to call them, I'm not sure. You can maybe put in the chat what's best, street parks with a hyphen, street parks, or street parks. This is what I call them. So this is, I'm basing this on the premise that there are many roads in London which don't need to be roads. They can carry, they don't need, by which I mean they don't need to carry traffic, and they don't need to accommodate car parking. What we're saying is that boroughs should identify roads which can become parks in areas of deficiency, particularly where there are high levels of deprivation. In many cases, access for roads, if you create a street park, you do have to retain access for emergency and utility services, but that can be done while also creating large, safe and pleasant and quiet space for either recreational play. Moving on. So this is my example. So we're going to move through these quite quickly. So Alfred Place is a road in Camden, in the southern end of Camden. You can see it's highlighted there with the red dot. If you move down, you can see moving through these quite quickly. That's how it was. And now, if you move to the next one, you can see what it is now. And then if we keep moving. This is nearby where our offices are. We ran a campaign a few years ago about turning St John's, the south end of St John Street, into a park. So this is the view. If you keep moving through them, that's what it looked like until quite recently, and they've keep going. And what I wanted to show you is that this is a very historic area. Amazingly, it's on the AGAS map of 15 something, and it had a magistrates court in the middle. If you're slightly on 2 slides there, and that's what it looked like. And then we were saying that should become a park, and that is indeed now what's happening. So we're really, really delighted that that is happening. And lots of people were applying pressure for that to happen. So keeping going. That was at the time we ran a campaign. We did a bit of a visualization of what it could look like. Keeping going. Keep going. More. Was that the end? Oh, if that's the end,
that's
then
the
we
end.
can
That's the
then
end.
we can move on to John, who's going to show us some. I've slightly run of time, but if when John finishes, I can show you our page on street parks. So I'll post it into the chat. But John, my colleague, is now going to show the second way that we are promoting, which is another way that we can create parks in London. In fact, that we've been campaigning for some time now, which was our 10 New Parks for London campaign, which will now be known as the New Parks for London campaign, or Create New Parks. And this is about showing how there is in fact tons of space out there which can be used for new parks, and that in fact there are many people campaigning for it. So John, I think hopefully you've got a few slides to show people on that issue.
Yes, I have. We're just loading up the slides now. And hello, everybody. I'm John Sadler. I work with Alice on campaigns and planning at CPRE London. A lot of our work is about stopping things being built and having green spaces taken away from us. But the project I want to talk to you about now is about creating new parks and actually being very proactive and working with local groups to increase the amount of green space. So have our next slide, please. So since 2020, we've been supporting local campaign groups across London to bring a number of green spaces which are inaccessible but also protected by protections such as Greenbelt, Metropolitan Open Land, sites of importance for nature conservation and so on, trying to bring those back into public use, helping the local people create visions and advocate for new parks and nature reserves. We've provided advice on strategy, on legal issues and potential sources of funding. And many of the groups have been extremely effective in fundraising for themselves as well, and have fundraised over £1 million in some cases. We've also been influencing decision makers on the local level and across London through the GLA, and using our social media as well to amplify the voices of those local groups. And we've given evidence on the issue of protected but derelict out of use land to the London Assembly, Environment Committee, and also London boroughs, politicians and key influencers. So next slide, please. And here you see one of the sites that we're helping to create into a new park down in Lewisham, on the border with Lewisham and Greenwich, which is completely fenced off. And many of these areas are former playing fields or areas of green space which were in use and have been bought up by landowners who want to develop them. And in order to do so, they usually cut off public access, and they try and degrade the site so that if it's an existing piece of protected land like Metropolitan Open Land or Greenbelt, then they will try and degrade it so that they can try and get planning permission for building and sell it off. So it's about profit as well. And the work we're doing is trying to unlock these sites with local community groups. But the most important thing for these areas is that they're given a vision, because they don't have any identity at the moment. They're sitting in areas which people don't even know about, can't reach, and which don't really have any idea. And if they are not valued, if they're not seen as being a space which has a future and a possibility for people, then local councils won't value them and landowners will build on them. And next slide, please. And here we have another map. It's just showing the 10 sites for creating new parks that we're working on at the moment. And they are indicated by a little tree symbol on an orange circle. I don't have the pointer with me, but I'll just tell you that there are 10, and they spread across London, and they vary completely in what they might be. For example, they could be former playing fields, which we want to bring back into use for the public, or they could be concrete grey spaces, brownfield sites, like in Waltham Forest, where we want to try and work with the local group to create a wild swimming area, park for the public. And they might also be places where there is great riches in nature and bird life, and we'd like to see them protected as accessible to the public, but also for nature. So not just for sport and recreation, but also to protect the wild spaces in London, where nature can thrive and help our environment. And one of the sites that we're going to talk about a little bit more now, I'm going to focus in on one. So there are 10. And if we have the next slide. We have the 10 here, and there'll be links to these on our website, and I'll show you some links at the end, which we'll share in the chat. And as you can see, they are spreading across the city in different places. One of them in particular we're going to talk about today, and that one is the Edgelands Park along the River Roding. And that straddles all sorts of different council areas: Newham, Redbridge, Barking and Dagenham. So it's a complicated case because there are different parcels of land, some owned by local authorities, some owned by companies or developers. Some are accessible, some are not. Some could be brought back in to use. And there is a vision for this site which has been created by the River Roding Trust, and there's a link there which I definitely encourage you to visit, and we'll share it in the chat. And I've got some photographs now and a little bit of information. I'm not a complete expert on the detail of these proposals because I'm not one of the local campaigners, but I do have some knowledge, and I will try and illuminate to you now why these places are important and what the local groups are trying to do. So we have the next slide. We'll start looking at the Edgelands proposal. And here's quite a good overview of what's being talked about. This is the River Roding, and on the side you can see there's plenty of green space between the river and the North Circular, and also on the other side with the housing. And on the other side of the North Circular as well, there are playing fields and green spaces. And what we see here is the motorway has completely cut off communities, it's cut off green space, and it's prevented people from, and wildlife from moving between different areas. And the proposal that the group have is to try and make this disused stretch of riverside made up of brownfield and greenfield sites into a new linear park and a walking route, which is going to connect the Roding Valley Way to the Thames Estuary. So it's an ambitious proposal, and throughout this it will be bringing in new green spaces on either side of the river, and also trying to make a walking and pedestrian access, wildlife access under parts of the North Circular where it's got flyovers and between green spaces, so that we can start joining up communities again and wildlife can move freely. So next slide, please. And here you can see some of the former industrial brownfield type land, which is in the distance. You've got the gas holders, and this area is sort of marshland right next to the North Circular, which could easily be turned into playing pitches. It could be turned into areas with wildlife areas and ponds and so on. And the River Roding Trust are doing wonderful work locally to try and open up these green spaces, clean them and restore them to something which could resemble a wonderful walking route, an area for nature. And the vision would draw in more visitors and attention to the area, which is very deprived and very green space deficient. And it's very much representing a sort of boundary in the city. It's sort of between boroughs, between roads and reed beds, and between all sorts of things. So it's very much sort of the countryside in the city. It's rural and urban. It's an area of great potential, and it's been forgotten about because people don't see it and they can't access it always. And that's where the positive work comes in. Next slide, please. And they also have environmental objectives as well. With the wetlands area, we're hoping to try and work with them to restore the wetlands for the community so they can enjoy nature and they can thrive alongside the flood risk posed in the lower reach of the River Roding, so that the flood risk can be mitigated by good work to restore these wetland areas, and also have a continuous path alongside as well. Next slide, please. And also a new riverside path could create the missing link of the walkway between Barking and Ilford and link it to the existing path at Wanstead Park. through the Aldersbrook and creating new linear park and wetlands on land which is currently owned by the Transport for London, with the intention to possibly provide access for cyclists after a few years. So there's enormous potential here along the river. And our next slide, please. We have some positive news as well. This isn't the complete answer to the whole vision, but it is one step towards it. In July this year, Redbridge Council has been awarded £3 million towards this vision, and it's going to transform the walking route between Wanstead Park and the Roding Valley in Ilford, new green spaces, a riverside path, and it's being funded through the GLA's Civil Partnership Programme, and it's supporting areas which is affected by inequality and so on. So there's been some really good news here. It's not complete, there's still lots of work to be done, and the River Roding Trust will continue its work to clean the river, recruit new volunteers, and bring their vision into a reality. Our next slide, please. And there we have all of those 10 new parks again, all of which have good history to them. They have different aspects to them, and I'd encourage you to look into them. If you're living near one of these places, please do get in touch with the group. If you'd like to volunteer, please do donate. Please follow them on social media and promote them. And it wouldn't be, I mean, when the mayor and other councils and people provide funding trust, it's because of the good work that's been done by those local groups to promote their vision, and they've shown why there is value to these spaces. And each one has a fascinating history in its own right. And our next slide, please. And that's pretty much the conclusion to the presentation for me. And it's pretty much what I'd like to leave you with really is the belief and the understanding that there is plenty of green space in London which is currently locked up, which doesn't have an identity, and it's through making links with people and getting out and doing work on the ground where you can really start to create positive future for these spaces. And please do have a look at our website. You can see the link there. Consider becoming a member of CPRE London. You know, we are a very small charity. We do depend on the support of our members to survive. I think you can join for as little as £5 a month. Definitely worth it. You get newsletters, and we'll keep you in touch with what's going on at CPRE London, how you can get more involved in some of these types of work and volunteering opportunities, and you can donate to us as well. Please do follow us on social media. And many thanks indeed for joining today. Really appreciate your interest. Thank you.
Thanks so much, John. So that's the end of the presentations. I had hoped to take you through our page on our website about street parks, which I've posted a link to, but I'm just going to post it again right now. That has lots and lots of other examples of where streets and roads have been turned into public amenity space. So I've just posted that if you want to explore that page, but I just really wanted to leave a bit of time for questions. So if people have questions, or there are some in the chat, if anybody has noticed questions in the chat that are good ones to ask, otherwise please put up your hand if you know how. It's in the react button. You have to press the react button, then it can show you how to raise your hand. And then so there's been a huge amount of chat, so I haven't been able to follow it completely. But Michael, good to see you here today, Michael. And yeah.
Is it me, Michael Ball?
Michael Ball, yeah, sorry. Could you introduce yourselves before you speak, if that's okay? I should just say, we will stay on for until 1:45, but we do understand if people need to drop out because it is meant to be a lunchtime webinar. So if you need to drop out, that's fine. Thank you so much for coming. We'll keep going now until we've kind of run out of questions, if you like. Okay, Michael.
Yeah, I'm Michael Ball from Just Space, which is a network of community organisations dealing with planning issues across London. About 300 people involved, about 90 groups. do join us. Open space is one of the many issues that we have to deal with. Two things. One is that on my other hat, I run Waterloo Community Development Group. In Waterloo, we had Lambeth did an open space analysis back in 2003, as required by government at that point. And but they failed to take anything that was less than half an acre into account, which in Waterloo, actually, we've got a lot of things that are less than half an acre, but still very valuable. They found 12 open spaces. We commissioned an organisation to do another count, and they found 140 spaces. Lots and lots of very small spaces, but they're all really important when you're in dense areas, and London is becoming increasingly dense. So there needs to be, I think, a very different approach to looking at space. But this also involves the fact that a lot of open space is not always green, but still very useful. And the most obvious is the Riverside Walk, which is often pavement, but is fantastic open space. The other thing I wanted to raise was the issue of housing amenity space. This is a space on housing estates, which is open space, green open space, often really nice green open space, often in areas of estates that are quite deprived. They are giving huge value and dealing with deprivation. They are under threat with the housing regeneration, estate regeneration process, whereas 130 estates across London are under threat of being redeveloped. And really it's because there's an attempt to grab this land, this open space, this green open space, this very valuable green open space, to try and make it into housing, market housing that will then pay for the redevelopment of the social housing. So that's an incredibly problematic issue. But I notice on the Go London site, there's no reference to those spaces. Occasional bits, but mostly they're not put on the map, and that's, I think, an anomaly.
Okay, so I think what we're talking about here is two things. One is the quality of the data that we have, which enables us to understand what people have access to. And then the other issue is the green spaces around housing estates, which may be in very high levels of deprivation in those estates. And that might be a slightly separate issue because those green spaces, of course, they're valuable, they're accessible to those people, they're not public as such, although sometimes they're open to the public. So I think this just kind of emphasizes how complex this issue is, and that it's not remotely straightforward, and that we're not saying we have all these answers, but we do think that there's, that we need something more sophisticated than what we're doing right now, I think. And of course, the protection of those spaces is ultimately what's so important. The quality of them is also very, very important. But if we don't know what we've got, it's very difficult to either protect them or to improve them. So moving on, Alison, if you could say who you are and where you're from. Alison.
Hello.
Been in touch
I
before.
live in Kingston-on-Thames, and it's following on really about the point of regeneration. Our estate is being regenerated, and we've lost 60 mature trees, 2 kilometres of public rights of way, lots of green space, and we are in an area of deficiency defined by Giggle. Originally, the planning permission was granted on the basis that we weren't in an area of deficiency, because lo and behold, the cemetery was redefined as open space, and we're allowed to walk our dogs in there. So we said at the time that this would change, and certainly now it has. So it's phase 2, the outline planning permission was given in 2020, and phase 2 is now going to planning. So I went back to our assembly member, or members, I should say, because we'd already taken this up with head of planning from the assembly about the gerrymandering of the green spaces and what was really quite a loss of green space, and re-providing very poor quality strips of steepers, invasive grasses, and other, very shoddy planting, and all the biodiversity benefits going on the roof where they can't be evidenced. And so I went to the assembly member, and first of all, Andrew Boff, who's supposed to be interested in green spaces, his representative said that because it had been given planning permission, then nobody was interested at the GLA. But I went back and said, well, you know, hang on a sec, this green space, you know, the planning permission, it defies the London plan. And so at the moment, I'm still trying to, 4 weeks later, contact our Assembly member, Gareth Roberts, who doesn't seem to like answering emails either. So my question is, what can we do? Who can we go to? What, you know, the council, who are joint partners in this joint partnership with Countryside Properties, they won't answer any of the queries that we put before them, and no one cares, no one cares, no one cares.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that really what this says to me is that you can create a map using any, you know, we could create one using what we think is a good set of criteria. You could use a different set of criteria, but what that doesn't actually tell you is you know, actually what people are experiencing locally. And actually that might be ultimately the most important thing. So so there is a kind of gap between what we map and what actually is going on the ground, and in a way, having policies and maps might actually, in some ways, work against what is important. But I mean, certainly we have campaigned around infill, what they call infill development. So that's taking a housing estate and removing people's green spaces to put more housing. We've certainly recognised that those sites are not protected often, and that they need to be protected. So I think that at the moment it's down to local campaigning, and we very much support people in that way. But secondly, it's probably about how certain sites are protected. So with smaller sites, they would need to have a higher level of protection, I think is the only answer, isn't it? Ultimately. So I hope that's vaguely answers that. I mean, I don't think there's any clear answer to this, but mostly it's bigger sites like that have protections like greenbelt or metropolitan open land, or have a covenant like they're a park, or they're held under the Public Health Act, things like that. So that gives them a higher level of protection, if you like. And there is ultimately no definite protection for anything, as we've discovered to our horror in London. But I think having some kind of level of protection is important. So there is something called local green space, which is the same level of protection as greenbelt and metropolitan open land, which a council can choose to apply to smaller green spaces. So there may be a way of looking for that. There's something, town or village green protection is a big one, is a really important one. All of these rely on the landowners being amenable to them. So sorry, would anyone else like to ask a question? Our chat's still going strong, which is amazing. I'll copy the chat and circulate it afterwards. So yeah, this still got we've had more than 60 people in the room today, which is really amazing. I'm so delighted that that people are you know, thinking about this issue. Certainly I think it's one that we'll come back to. But if nobody else has any questions right now, then I'll close the meeting, and just thank you for coming. Thank Gessienne in particular for the amazing work that she did helping us with it, that they did working with this, and also just to really emphasize how incredibly important it is that we all keep focused on this, and we do present solutions rather than necessarily kind of focusing too much on the mapping, but actually think about the solutions and get in touch with your council and ask them to. Oh, we do. So somebody, Isabel, you just have your hand up there. If you'd like to speak.
Yes, just a quick question. Have you had any feedback from the Mayor of London on this approach? Not necessarily the particular map, but your general approach.
only to the extent that when we submitted it to the London Plan consultation, and we have raised it with them in meetings as well, that they did say they were interested in it and interested at looking at the issue. So yes, is the answer. And we are hoping that there will be some change or some more sophistication in the way that it's dealt with in the new London Plan at least. But I think it's not just about the London Plan document, it's about the way that boroughs approach things as well. So, you know, no matter what the map says, actually there should be an effort by councils to all be thinking about areas where they could create more space. Stephen Boxall.
Yeah, hello. I just think it's worth saying that we're actually getting a newish generation of local authority officers coming through. And I think they're, well, the ones I've come across, I think they're quite open to this sort of thinking. So hopefully it's not all doom and gloom and we haven't got to wait too long before these young officers sort of are in greater positions of power and we can work with them and they can work with us.
Yeah, I guess we're always hopeful. We just are always keeping the pressure up, and I think officers and councillors as well. Certainly we're going to see probably a lot of interesting movement in the run up to next year's elections, and certainly we'll be using that to, you know, raise this issue. Yeah. So if we don't have any more comments or questions, then I'll say a close meeting and say thanks again to everybody for coming and for our participants and to John as well for his presentation and for everybody who's helped put this together. So thanks and goodbye.